Greetings from snowy, wintry Poughkeepsie. My name is Stacy Bingham, and I am the Associate Dean of the College for Career Development here at Vassar. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to today's keynote from Stephen Hatfield, Vassar Class of 1988 and Global Leader for the Future of Work at Deloitte. Many of you, our sophomores and alumni and parent mentors, are joining us as we kick off our 7th annual Sophomore Career Connections, an award-winning program that connects second-year students with one of Vassar's very best career resources, our alumni, parents, and friends of Vassar. For those of you not as familiar with Sophomore Career Connections, I'll begin with a bit of history. We piloted this program back in 2015 with 125 sophomores and 50 mentors. Today, the program has grown by leaps and bounds, doubling in size. Planning a program like this in January before the official open of campus takes a tremendous amount of coordination from the Career Development Office and the Office of Alumni Affairs and Development and the campus at large. Planning to deliver this program virtually presented a unique set of opportunities, but we were up for the challenge and found a silver lining. This year's virtual format allowed us to extend Stephen's keynote to the broader Vassar network, and we're happy to welcome you to this live stream, because who would not benefit from knowing a thing or two about how to thrive in the new future of work? I would like to close with a round of thanks and to personally acknowledge two very important people who have given tremendous support to this program for 7 years running, Carol Ostrow and Michael Graff. I would also like to thank our sophomores, our mentors, and the broader Vassar community. Without the mentors here to share their knowledge and expertise and the students here to soak it all up, we would not be here today. In just a moment, I'll turn the virtual mic over to Vassar's own President Elizabeth Bradley to introduce our keynote speaker, Stephen Hatfield, Class of '88. President Bradley has been a tremendous supporter of both Sophomore Career Connections and the Career Development Office, and it's clear that she cares deeply about the role that liberal arts colleges like Vassar play in preparing students for the world of work. President Bradley has said that the ultimate purpose of a liberal arts education is holistic preparation for the trials of work and life. I couldn't agree more.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for that very gracious introduction. It's now my distinct honor to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Stephen Hatfield. Stephen is a member of the class of 1988 at Vassar, and he was the president of Davidson House. After Vassar, he joined the Peace Corps, and as he came back, he worked in the field of re-engineering. Re-engineering is a really interesting field because it kind of looks at how technology can be used better. But what he grasped from this is, how does it affect people? What does it really mean for people when you change their work setting and their work style? He joined Deloitte in 1999 and has risen to the role of principal with Deloitte Consulting. He serves as the global leader for the future of work for the firm. He's been in this field for more than 25 years, and he's been advising global organizations on strategy, innovation, organization, people, change, culture change. He's advised business leaders on a range of their initiatives in terms of activating strategy, defining their preferred future, addressing workforce change, implementing agile and resilient operating models, and transforming culture into growth, innovation, and agility. He's a regular speaker and an author of many articles, as well as the author of The Future of Work. He's currently on the Deloitte leadership team, shaping the research and marketplace dialogue on future workplace and workplace trends and issues. Stephen, in addition to his Vassar degree, also has a master's in social change and development from Johns Hopkins and an MBA from the Wharton Business School. And before I let him take the stage, let me tell a funny story about his time in Davidson. He was the president, but it seems that a fire broke out in Davidson, well covered in the mist, and he was the one who said, you know, it's not just about whether we have fire alarms and smoke detectors. We really have to think about what people understand about these smoke detectors, so before, to make them safe. So before he even had this illustrious career, he was already thinking about how technology works, but you need more than technology. You need the people as well. Stephen, welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Hatfield, and I'm very excited to be here. I graduated from Vassar in 1988, and I spent the first few years out of Vassar in the Peace Corps. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Mali in West Africa, and that was where I caught sort of the bug, if you will, for thinking about how economies thrive and how the anthropology and sociology of work and economics kind of founds a society. And from there, I got a graduate degree at Wharton and at Johns Hopkins in sociology and anthropology and in business. But my very first job out of business school was helping Merrill Lynch. As a bright young MBA, I was asked to help them go online. And my job was to get the financial advisors of Merrill Lynch, the 25,000 individuals that actually manage the different clients of Merrill, on what the internet is about. I had to get them excited about the internet. Well, that was 1996. In those days, internet, schminternet. My kids played games on that. And so my job was to try to help them appreciate that this new channel for communication was something that was going to be really critical to them in their job and in their role going forward. At the time, it was kludgy. It was a dial-up. It was probably an entire array of things that you would have no memory of. But over time, the internet got much stronger and much greater. And today, the internet has 3 billion people on it and growing. So I believe I've been talking about the nature of technology and how that changes work, how that changes jobs for most of my career. So why is it different now? Because of this, the robot apocalypse, the end of jobs. The dialogue in the market and in the media is all about how robots are going to replace us in terms of the work that we do. And that scares people. That provokes anxiety. That sells hits. But in reality, it's something much, much different. It's much more about an unleashed workforce. It's much more about augmentation. It's much more about a dramatic set of changes that cross a variety of different disruptors beyond just robots and AI toolkits. And that's what makes the future of work so interesting. And what's now been very apparent, thanks to COVID, is that it's been a time machine. This is a quote from Anne-Marie Slaughter. She's a Princeton economist and head of the New Enterprise Foundation. The coronavirus and its economic and social fallout is a time machine to the future. Changes that many of us predicted would happen over the span of decades are instead taking place in the span of weeks. And so how do we now think about the trend line and where things are headed, that acceleration and what it's likely to create? Well, in order to do that, we need to take a step back. We need to set the stage a little bit and take a look at how our work life has evolved over time. So pre-industrial revolution, we were very agrarian, obviously. Work was very artisanal. We owned it from start to finish. And then, of course, through the first and second industrial revolutions, we moved into mechanization. We moved into bringing machines into the workplace. We moved into the mass production. And things like us working on a production line and the entire nature of how our society sort of organized itself around people migrating into factories, around people moving into cities to be close to those factories, around schools organizing themselves in such a way that individuals would sit at a desk and focus on a topic and learn how to do something in 45-minute increments. All of that generated an entire belief in the way that we needed to work and work in the future. And then, of course, we had computing. And that just brought greater analytical power to the same processes, to the same approach that we had been taken for hundreds of years. And now, in 2016, the World Economic Forum declared that we've moved into the fourth industrial revolution. That's where the cyber and the physical worlds are coming together. And frankly, that's where all of the change that we are now experiencing has started to accelerate at a great pace. The slide behind me shows the productivity curve and how it's been declining across every major and developed economy, even through the many, many, many investments that we've made in technology over the past 30, 40, 50 years. So why is our productivity declining, even as we're investing further in technology? Well, many people believe it's because of this. Technology is accelerating at an exponential pace. It means that as more and more technologies are subject to the digital dynamic, they become subject to Moore's law. They halve in power and halve in cost and double in power every 18 months. And so as they move at this rapid clip, it becomes hard for businesses to keep up. And as such, productivity is declining. Frankly, though, I think it's much more like this. So technology is moving at a rapid clip. And we actually like the fact that technology is moving at a rapid clip. As individuals, we like our phones. We like Alexa. We keep up with the technologies. The Singularity University says that the singularity itself, where we will no longer be able to keep up with technology, is coming in 2049. Well, it's 2020, so we have a little bit more time yet, and I believe that we will continue to adapt to these technologies as they progress. And as they do that, businesses then strive to keep up. Businesses are the ones that then realize, thanks to what consumers want in their technology, that they need to provide similar experiences. They're the ones that look at these technologies and bring them to the workplace. Alexa is a very good example. We like Alexa, right? She gets our lights, the kids talk to her, she gives us recipes, right? But many businesses have now decided to bring Alexa into their shop. JP Morgan Chase put Alexa on their trading floor over a year ago. And so as more and more of these technologies make their way into businesses start to keep up as well. And what really is falling behind, alas, is our public policy. And so in order to take advantage of appreciating all these different trends, we need to look at 7 major disruptors and what they're doing to create the trend for the new future of work. The first, technology is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. As I pointed out, when I first started in my career 30 years ago, it was about the internet only having 36 million people. Now there's 3.5 billion people on the internet. And if Qualcomm and Google are successful with some of what they're trying to do, they're going to create the opportunity for 7 billion people to be on the internet within the next 4 to 5 years. Google is trying to string the globe with a series of balloon satellites that enable you to have Wi-Fi access anywhere. Suddenly you'll have 7 billion people connected to the internet. And what will that mean in terms of the creative power? What will that mean in terms of the ability to crowd different things? What will that mean in terms of the different information that will be available to us as a society writ large? And we are moving off of 4G onto 5G. 5G is 20 times faster than 4G. So whenever you're connected and that little buffering that's spinning, that will go away. It's instantaneous. Imagine the power of 7 billion people connected on the internet with 5G capability. What will that mean in the future? I won't be coming to the Vassar to be videotaped for this presentation. I'll be an avatar, zeroing in from wherever I want in the world. The tsunami of data, our second major trend. We've created 9 times more data in the last 2 years than in all of human history. And yet, we only use about 0.5% of that data. Imagine what will happen if we can start to unlock more and more of that data. If we can use it in ways to create more interesting solutions for workforces or solutions for customers or different insights into the dynamics of the world at large, into science and into other dimensions of anthropology and sociology. Imagine what that will create for us. Well, the AI toolkits that exist today, they get smarter and smarter as they look at the data sets. The more the data, the smarter they become, the faster they learn. That's what machine learning is about. And so certainly over time, it's expected that these AI toolkits will be able to actually unlock more and more of that data, and we'll be able to use it in more and interesting ways. Again, we only use 0.5%. What will it feel like when we can use 5%, 10%? Well, that day is coming. The third major trend we've already talked a little bit about, AI, cognitive, and robotics, and the extent to which these things are coming to the workplace. And we've talked a little bit about the fact that the dialogue in the market is about the apocalypse, that the robots will take our jobs. Well, the interesting reality is that it's much more about augmentation. It's much more about, to some extent, sort of creating a workforce that is more empowered by these toolkits. We have a study that we did with Deloitte. It's our Human Capital Trends report. And last year, it showed that 65% of the respondents, these are C-suite individuals, business leaders, believe that they're going to be augmenting their workforce with AI toolkits. Only about 10% believe that they're going to be substituting. And somewhere in the vicinity of 5% actually want to use it to manage their workforce. During the COVID period, we were seeing a lot of this happen in the provider institutions. The AI toolkits were actually being used to help figure out the scheduling that needed to happen so that the right shifts could have all the different skills they needed on hand and still enable the providers to be able to take the requisite amount of time off they needed to rejuvenate and replenish. It's a crazy Tetris game, but those kinds of managerial tasks, AI toolkits are now taking on. Our fourth trend, the changing nature of jobs. So jobs aren't static. And obviously that makes great sense when you think about the kinds of work that used to take place hundreds of years ago, blacksmiths and so forth, and how that's all shifted now over time. But with the acceleration of these technologies, the continuous change happens faster and faster and faster. 15 years ago, cloud didn't exist. So cloud engineers didn't exist. 15 years ago, we weren't using technologies like this. Podcast producers was a job that didn't exist. I had the pleasure of being at a conference with a bunch of my fellow Deloitte partners, and we went down to the bar. And also at this hotel, there happened to be a similar conference taking place, but it was a gaming conference. It was in San Francisco. And so everybody was in the bar, and we ran into this woman in her 30s, and we started chatting with her. She has a PhD in gaming. She is a gaming historian. Now to you as an audience, that feels really obvious. But to many of the people in my generation, to talk about a gaming historian, well, that's a completely new job and a job that we hadn't thought of. As these technologies continue to progress, more and more interesting jobs will emerge. Another one of my favorites is drones. Drone racing is a $50 million business for X Games and ESPN. And right now, you can, many of us play and use with drones. But frankly, many of the consumer and retail companies in the world are starting to look at how to use drones to do things like assess their inventories. And so if you are someone who uses drones, there are jobs emerging that use those tools in new and interesting ways. And our next trend, the 100-year life. They say the first child to live to be 120 years old has already been born. What's happening here is the technologies that we use on a regular basis to think about the things I was describing, AI and toolkits and robotics, are all being applied now into the world of medicine and biotech and other pharmaceutical activities. It's possible now for computing power to actually use our own DNA to replicate drugs that are specifically designed to be most efficacious in our own systems. And these technologies come to life, more and more interesting startups have been created around what's now possible in terms of this greater longevity. And so the dialogue is shifting. It's moving away from lifespan into health span. One of my favorite technological companies is called Human Longevity, Inc. Their mantra, 120 is the new 60. And so what this does is it creates a very interesting set of dynamics on our next trend around diversity and generational change and the number of different generations that are moving into the workforce. The fastest growing segment of the US workforce are the baby boomers, those folks born after 64. And they are wanting to stay into the workforce for various reasons, some of which might be economic, but many of which is just because they have a lot more to contribute. They're living longer and healthier lives. But they want to stay in the workforce in a different way. They want what's now being called an encore career, something where they actually work how they want to work, from where they want to work. And they work on something that is much more about what they're excited about, something they're passionate about. What this means is that we are likely to now have, for the first time ever, 4 generations in the workforce at one time. So from people who are in your generation, who started entering in the workforce in the last couple of years, right on through to the baby boomers that I've been describing. And so it means the dynamics in the workplace will be very, very different. And it means that the way in which we lead and the way in which we organize the workplace and the kinds of programming that organizations bring to the table in terms of work needs to change. And part of what's also driving this is the explosion in contingent work, the rise of the gig economy. Not too long ago, the idea of sharing someone's different cabin or house or beach house that you would go online via Airbnb, something like that would have been unthinkable. Uber, Lyft, unthinkable. And now, of course, there's been a plethora of different gig economy businesses and constructs that have been developed. You have TaskRabbit and Amazon Flex, you have Fiverr and gig work, you have Uber. And more of these are sort of moving, if you will, upstream from task-based work to actually more professional level knowledge-based work. Topcoder is an example, Kaggle for data scientists. The top coder at Topcoder does very well. They make 6 figures or more. And so This is becoming a new way to actually engage in work. And as such, it's opening different doorways for many different kinds of, shall we say, models that organizations are looking at. So now you have organizations that are actually like Target, who have bought Shipt, which is an online buyer community. And they're trying to organize themselves around having both traditional and less traditional workers in the same shop. Same thing with Amazon and Amazon Flex. And during the pandemic, we saw some very interesting dynamics here. There was a 41% rise in job postings for freelancers and gig workers during the pandemic period. And we saw organizations like Marriott take and furlough their frontline workers into places like Amazon Flex and Walmart and Shipt, and they took their knowledge workers and furloughed them onto platforms like Upwork and Fiverr in order to give them an opportunity to earn some form of living during the time that they were shut down because of the pandemic. And that level of flexibility, though nascent, is something that we would expect to see more and more of in the world that's coming. And so, these are our 7 disruptors: the ubiquity of technology, the tsunami of data, AI, cognitive, and robotics and what that's doing to the workplace, the changing nature of jobs, the 100-year life, the rise of the contingent worker, and the multiple generations in the workforce. So with all of these trends, how do we begin to chart a course for the future? Well, Albert Einstein said, you can't use an old map to explore a new world. And yet, we are still using old maps. We're using old mental models in how we think about it. These are 3 economists that you may have heard of. The first is Frederick Taylor. Taylorism was all about time and motion studies. It's about efficiency and output. It was about ensuring that when you were on that production line, you were moving as efficiently as possible to get as much throughput as possible. The middle one, Ronald Coase, he was a Nobel Prize winner for the theory of the firm. He believed that all the different parts of an organization, the IT, the legal, the finance, the HR, and so forth, all were resident under one umbrella because that reduced the friction cost between them to transact and get things done. And then, of course, William White. He created the term groupthink. He wrote the book, The Organization Man. For him, it was all about you enter an organization and you sublimate yourself to the greater culture. And you become one with that culture, and you become part of that organization, and you stay with it for the duration of your career. These are the mental models that we still bring to the table as we're unpacking all of these trends. The Economist mentioned something back in 2015 around Taylorism taking on a new form, digital Taylorism. We're just using digital means to change and alter that time and motion study. And if we can all work on gig platforms, and those digital platforms have seamless interaction, does that mean we all need to be under the same roof in the same shop to get something done? It's much more about ecosystems today. And finally, in order to drive innovation, you want creativity. You want a different way of thinking. You want to co-create. You want to produce. You want a more artisanal approach to the work. And that is not at all the way that the organization man would want things to be. And so we must use an enhanced lens. We must think about this in terms of the work, the workforce, and the workplace. And in doing so, it's actually about the tasks and the activities. It's about the kinds of things that you do in order to generate value. What is the outcome that you're trying to produce? In terms of the workforce, it's about the capabilities and the skills, the job composition. It's a very different thing. It's about the different talent models. And in terms of the workplace, it's now about the physical workplace and the digital workplace. And it's about the mix of the two of them in some fashion. The workplace is no longer actually a physical location. And in order for you to then go to a physical location, it's much more about that location being worthwhile for your time to get there, a destination, a place where you go to create and collaborate and interact and have social activities with your coworkers. And so it becomes much more about an augmented workforce, a variety of machines and people working together on teams to create new outcomes, and a variety of different talent models where you tap into the gig workers or the other parts of the ecosystem or the different partners or vendors to deliver on all that it is you're trying to grow or create. And so the World Economic Forum, as a result, put out a study this past year on what are the different trends and what are the different skills that will be needed in this world that's coming. And if you step back and you think about the different trends and what that starts to unpack for us, it starts to say that, well, the typical skill that you would learn actually won't be relevant throughout the duration of your career. So you have to start thinking about it differently. You have to think about it in terms of the knowledge that you acquire. You have to think about it in terms of the basic skill that you may have, and by a skill, something that is using a particular technology toolkit or using a different piece of software or creating a video or whatever it might be. And then you have to think about the enduring human capability that actually grounds all of that. And as you look at this list behind me, you start to see that many of what the World Economic Forum is saying will become the important skills over the next 10 years are actually skills that we think of as enduring human capabilities. They say the half-life of a technical skill is only about 18 months. That's according to GitHub. And they say the half-life of a business skill is about 2 to 5 years. But these enduring capabilities, complex systems thinking, empathy, storytelling, creation, production management, hypothesis-driven problem solving, resiliency, leadership, flexibility, these enduring capabilities can be brought to bear no matter what career you may have. And of course, the dynamic that's emerging is one where it will no longer be a case that you will go to an educational institution, you will learn something that's knowledge and a skill, and that you'll apply that for the next 30 years and then you'll retire. Those days are long gone. What it's going to be much more about is an ongoing dimension of lifelong learning. The most critical thing you can learn is the passion for learning, that ability to explore, that ability to create. And that is what you will bring to the workplace. And over time, you will migrate across many different adjacencies in your career, and you will do many different things. They say that the majority of individuals today will have 15 different careers in their lifetime. And remember, that life will be much longer and much healthier. And so your career will be 50 or even 60 years long. And you'll be doing something, hopefully, that you're very excited and passionate to do. And you'll be able to flex in and out through that career duration to do many different things. And so that ability to bring an enduring set of human capabilities to the table, that ability to be passionate about what you learn, becomes paramount. And so through the pandemic, we believe that there are 5 major lessons that were learned. 1, human potential is our greatest untapped asset. And that's a shift, frankly, in the way that many organizations think. But what we found during the pandemic was that in the moment of crisis, organizations tapped into their workforce in ways that were very different than they had in the past. It became critical that they began to understand their workers and the capabilities they brought to the table differently than just the bullets in their job description. And by understanding that capability set and by understanding that potential, that's a real power that organizations are now recognizing they need to tap into more and more, and thus the focus that they're starting to bring to upskilling and reskilling their workforce. True top-of-the-house leadership is different than something we've ever seen before. It's more authentic, it's more connected, it's more real, and in many respects more empathetic. That servant leader model is one that's now on the rise in a way that's different than it may have been in the past. And in order for leaders to lead organizations in dynamics where they're very disparate, where they're very virtual, where they're very connected across vast ecosystems, an entirely different model of leadership is now emerging that's required. Leadership and culture are much more about connection and much more about empowerment. What we found is that it was the project leader, it was the team leader, it was the people manager in organizations, the core set of leaders, not those at the top, but those that lead throughout, were the ones that were the most critical to keeping an organization moving, to keeping a culture connected, to keeping people healthy and empowered, and about making sure that the organizational mission, the outcome that team was focused on, was actually being driven in the right way. The dialogue about wellness at work, about belonging, about purpose, about empowerment increased over the course of the pandemic. And these are the mental models that will be more paramount as we move forward into the future. We believe that work is the most underutilized source of value that there is. Organizations have spent too much time in the past thinking about it in terms of production and output and throughput, as opposed to the artisanal craft of work itself. And that is now back on the rise. Organizations are now looking at that and realizing that in order for us to move forward, we need to take advantage of these technologies in new ways. We need to elevate what humans are good at so that humans can thrive, and we need to let the technologies do what they're good at, the automation and the processing and the data collection and all of those other things. And then finally, ecosystems and vast ecosystems are much more essential to the resiliency and flexibility that's required. It is no longer possible for you to have under the one umbrella of your shop, of the enterprise, all the different capabilities and skills that you need. But it is possible to curate an extended ecosystem of workers and to tap into those as you need them. And so, what does this mean for individuals? What does it mean for organizations? What does it mean for public policy? For individuals, it means about engaging in lifelong learning. It means about having multiple careers. It means putting on an explorer's mindset. And it means being ready to have to follow the different adjacencies in your passions and to sort of grow and create in new and different ways. Not to be afraid of technology, to bring that to life every day, but it's much more about an enduring set of human capabilities that you need to hone and craft that you will use again and again. For organizations, it's about upskilling and reskilling. It's about re-architecting work, thinking about how to use the technologies differently. It's about moving away from those mental models into something that's much more about unleashing the power of your organization, tapping into the greater innovation, and to focusing on things that in the past may not have been so front and center: well-being and belonging, purpose, mission, and empowerment. And for public policy, it means a variety of things. It means about rethinking higher ed. It means about rethinking how we go after a condition of lifelong learning. It means rethinking our educational system in general, not beating out the creativity in all students in primary school as they sit there in those 45-minute increments. It also means about looking at the social safety net. We have to think about how to take advantage of this dynamic economy in a new and different way. In the United States and in other Western economies, they say that because our social safety net is connected to where we work, our benefits packages, our retirement programs, that actually becomes a bit of a drag to that dynamic economy that's emerging. How do we rethink making sure that the gig workers have what they need in terms of healthcare and in terms of measuring the vagaries of their income stream and in terms of their retirement? And then finally, what does this mean around all of the legal and regulatory positions that governments can take? So we've seen a lot lately around data privacy. We've seen a lot lately around the rise of big tech and what that means. We've seen a lot lately around the different regulations for the gig economy. All of these mean that public policy has to take a step back, think a little bit more about what is worker preference, what is actually going to drive these trends in a new and dynamic way, and how to do so in a way that isn't with the mental model of the past, but the model of what the future holds. So, as I wrap, let me leave you with this quote. It's from Thomas Friedman. Today's workers need to approach the workplace much like athletes preparing for the Olympics, but with one difference. They have to prepare like someone who is training for the Olympics, but doesn't know what sport they're going to enter. Thank you, everyone. Let's get to work. Yay.